At first, I just thought he was tired. He's a man after all, getting older but always trying to appear strong. When he coughed, he said it was just allergies. When he started eating less, he claimed he just wasn't hungry in the morning. I was used to his silence, so I didn't think much of it. Until I noticed. His eyes were getting dimmer, his hands slightly trembled each time he poured tea, and the strangest thing, he didn't enjoy going out to the garden anymore. There are signs so small, so subtle, we assume they're just part of getting old. But if I had known earlier, maybe things would have turned out differently. In this video, I want to share 7 quiet warning signs my husband once experienced. Things that seemed harmless, but were actually urgent messages from his body. If you live with an aging loved one, or if you've noticed some of these signs in yourself, please stay until the end of this video. Because sometimes, one small change today could save an entire lifetime. Now, let's start with the first sign. Sudden loss of balance when standing up or walking. I remember very clearly one winter morning last year. He had just gotten out of bed when he suddenly stopped, staggered a few steps, and grabbed onto the edge of the dresser. I turned to look, startled, but he just smiled and said, "Probably just lay down too long. The blood hasn't reached my brain yet." Hearing that, I felt somewhat reassured. It's normal, I thought. When you're older, feeling dizzy after getting up isn't unusual. That's all I thought it was. But then, it didn't just happen once. One day at the supermarket, he was pushing the cart ahead of me when he suddenly stopped, swayed a little, and held onto the cart handle like he was about to fall. I rushed to steady him, and again, he brushed it off. Probably just slipped a little. He always tried to make things seem less serious. I was half convinced, half worried, because he was never the type to admit when something was wrong. I didn't want to push him. I didn't want to upset him. And honestly, I blame myself for not being more firm. Until the day he nearly fell while stepping down from the front porch. I was watering the plants when I heard a noise, turned around, and saw him teetering, one foot already missing the last step. He grabbed the railing just in time. If he hadn't, he could have broken a bone, or worse. My heart was pounding. That whole day, I couldn't calm down. I started researching and found out that frequent loss of balance in older adults can be a sign of something serious, possibly related to the brain, the nervous system, or the inner ear. It's not just about aging. I was scared. Scared we had waited too long. Scared he might be carrying something we didn't fully understand. From then on, I began watching more closely. It turned out it wasn't just dizziness. He often veered slightly to one side when walking, especially in the afternoon. Once, while walking, he suddenly froze like he forgot what he was about to do. These small details I used to overlook, but now, every time I recall them, a chill runs down my spine. I took him to the doctor. After some tests and an MRI, the doctor said he had signs of reduced blood flow to the brain, and they needed to monitor him for potential mini-strokes. If it hadn't been caught early, it could have led to a full-blown stroke, something I don't even want to imagine. I used to think I was taking great care of him. He ate well, slept on time, stayed in good spirits. But I ignored the signs that were right in front of me, because they were so small. Because I was used to seeing him as strong, I convinced myself everything was fine. I'm not sharing this to blame myself or to seek sympathy. I'm sharing this to remind anyone who might be in my shoes, not to overlook those unsteady steps or brief moments of imbalance in a loved one. Some signs don't wait until we're ready, and sometimes just one fall is enough to change everything. If you've seen your loved one lose balance, even just once, please take them to get checked. Don't wait until something worse happens. I've lived through that fear, and I hope you won't have to. If you find my content meaningful to you, comment number 1 to let me know. Now I will talk about sign number 2. Difficulty. Swallowing, choking in the throat when eating and drinking. At first it was the seaweed soup. His favorite. I cooked it like always, even simmered it longer because the weather was chilly that day. But when I served it, he only took a few spoonfuls before putting down his chopsticks. I asked why he wasn't eating, and he just smiled and said, "Feels a little scratchy in the throat today. Maybe you used too much garlic." I didn't think much of it, just told him I'd make it milder next time. But in the days that followed, he only ate foods that were really soft. Everything else, he'd take a few bites and stop. I thought maybe he just wasn't hungry. Then one afternoon, I made chicken soup, the one he always called our house specialty, the dish I'd cooked dozens of times whenever someone was feeling unwell. But he only managed half a bowl before stopping. I noticed he was swallowing slowly and sometimes seemed to choke a bit halfway through. I asked and he said, "My throat's a little dry. Maybe I haven't been drinking enough water." I believed him. I always believed him, especially when he said things so gently. But something inside me started to feel uneasy. This was a man who used to eat heartily, suddenly slowing down, picking at food, avoiding meat, fish, anything chewy, and even asked me to make the porridge thinner than usual. I began to look into it and found that difficulty swallowing, especially in older adults, can be an early warning sign of several serious conditions, from esophageal issues to minor strokes affecting the muscles involved in swallowing, and even early signs of throat cancer. I broke out in goosebumps. All this time, I thought choking was just a minor issue, but it wasn't. I decided to take him to the doctor. They ran a scope and imaging of his throat. Thankfully, there was no major damage, but there were signs of esophagitis and chronic acid reflux, causing inflammation and swelling in his throat. The doctor warned that if left untreated, the lining of the throat could change, possibly leading to dysplasia and increasing the risk of cancer. My knees went weak hearing that. I couldn't imagine what might have happened if I had continued to stay silent, ignoring the winces on his face or the way he'd quietly set his chopsticks down. Sitting in the waiting room, watching him through the glass door of the endoscopy room, I asked myself, how did I let things go this far? Just because I thought it was nothing serious. Because he didn't complain, and I didn't want to bother the doctor. Only now do I realize, sometimes the illness isn't in the pain, it's in the silence. I'm not sharing this to scare you, but to help you stay alert. If someone you love, your parent, spouse, or an elderly friend, suddenly starts eating more slowly, seems to struggle swallowing, or complains of a lump in their throat, don't brush it off like it's nothing. The body always speaks, it's just a matter of whether we're willing to listen. And if I could go back to that moment when he put down the bowl of seaweed soup, I wouldn't just ask, "Why aren't you eating?" I would ask, "Are you feeling anything strange?" Maybe just that one question could have changed everything. Sign 3. Sudden changes in personality, angry or unusually quiet. He used to be a quiet man, but always easygoing. People liked visiting us because of the way he would listen attentively, nod, and occasionally say something so clever it made everyone laugh. But after a while, he seemed to turn into someone else. Whenever I asked him anything, he'd snap. "Why do you keep asking me that? I'm fine. Just leave me alone." Words I had never heard from him before, but now they came out almost every day. At first I thought it was the weather. Winter was cold, joints hurt, and anyone could get a little irritable. Then I blamed it on aging, that everyone gets grumpy at some point. I tried to be patient, to keep things light, but day by day, he withdrew more. He stopped watching the news in the evenings like he used to. He didn't talk to the grandkids. Some days, he wouldn't say a word, just sat on the porch, staring at the sky, lost in thoughts I couldn't reach. When I asked, he simply replied, "Silence is better." I started to worry, not because he snapped at me, but because something in his eyes had changed. The warmth was gone. It looked like someone trapped inside himself, irritated without knowing why, exhausted without being able to explain. I told our family doctor, and he asked me one question. Has your husband been sleeping differently, forgetting more, or lost interest in things he used to enjoy? I nodded. So the doctor recommended a neurological and psychological checkup. The results weren't severe, but the doctor said he showed early signs of mild cognitive impairment, MCI, a condition that often precedes various forms of dementia. And the scary part was this: the first symptom wasn't memory loss. It was a change in personality. Sometimes the body sends out signals in the most unexpected ways. A calm person who suddenly becomes irritable. Someone who used to laugh and chat falling into silence. We see it, but we don't realize what it means. What saddened me most wasn't the diagnosis. It was the fact that I'd lived beside him for decades and still didn't recognize the changes inside him sooner. At one point, I even thought he was annoyed with me or tired of our life together. But now I understand. He was struggling with something within himself, and he didn't have the words to express it. And I should have been the first to notice, not the one who tiptoed past the outbursts without question. If you live with an aging loved one and suddenly notice them becoming short-tempered, withdrawing into silence, or reacting in ways that don't seem like them, don't dismiss it as just being difficult or getting old. They may need you to look a little closer. A kind question, a gentle hand, a willingness to suggest a checkup. Sometimes that's all they need to feel less alone in whatever changes are happening inside. And if I've learned anything from this journey, it's this: love isn't just about being present. It's about being sensitive enough to notice when someone you love is changing, even just a little. Sign 4. Bruises on the skin with unknown cause, or that do not dissolve for a long time. There was a time when I was folding laundry and noticed a bruise on his arm, about the size of a coin, deep purple and green. I asked him about it, and he brushed it off, saying, "Probably bumped into the bed frame and didn't notice." I nodded, thinking, well, men don't pay attention to little things like that. But days passed, and the bruise didn't fade. It even spread a bit. I started to worry, but he still refused to see a doctor, just gave a half smile and said, "My blood's probably thinner these days." Then I started noticing more bruises, on his calves, his shoulders, even on his back. Some were the size of a fingertip, others as big as a hand. What troubled me most was that he couldn't recall bumping into anything. One day, I quietly took a photo and sent it to our niece, who's a nurse. She said, "You should take him in for a blood test. Unexplained bruising in older adults can signal issues with blood clotting, liver function, or fragile blood vessels." I felt a chill run through me. I remember the first time I held his hand, back when we were in school. His hands were rough, sun-tanned, smelled of engine oil and wood. Now when I hold that same hand, the skin is as thin as paper, turning red with the slightest scratch. Aging softens a person, but it also makes them more vulnerable. And sometimes the real damage happens inside, silently, until it finally shows up on the surface as a cry for help that comes too late. I took him to the hospital. The doctor said his liver function had mildly declined, and some of his medications were affecting his blood's ability to clot. If not addressed, he risked internal bleeding. That hit me like a wake-up call. I had been by his side every single day and still didn't realize those bruises were trying to tell me something, while I remained silent. Since that day, every time I help him bathe or change clothes, I check his skin carefully. Not out of fear, but because I now understand that the body speaks in its own quiet language. A bruise with no clear cause, a wound that won't heal, even skin that reddens too easily. All of these are ways the body says, "I'm tired." And when our loved ones don't say a word, we have to be the ones who listen on their behalf. I'm sharing this because I know there are many wives like me, so used to seeing their husbands as the strong ones, the pillars who carried the family through the years, that we forget they too are vulnerable, that they too need someone to notice the little things. But sometimes, those little things are what save them from something far worse. If you've ever seen an unexplained bruise on someone you love, don't just ask casually and move on. Look closer, and if needed, be the one to take them to the doctor. Not because you're overreacting, but because you love them enough not to ignore even the smallest warning sign. Signs 5. Excessive daytime sleeping, suddenly falling asleep for no reason. He had always been someone who slept like clockwork. Lights off at 10 p.m. sharp, up around 6 a.m., followed by a few laps around the garden before breakfast. That routine had stuck with him since his working days, steady for decades. But at some point, I noticed he started dozing off during the day. Not just a quick nap after lunch, but nodding off while watching TV, during conversations, even in the middle of a meal. Once we were eating noodle soup together. I turned away for a moment to grab a spoon, and when I looked back, he was sitting still, eyes shut. I gently nudged him. "Hey, are you okay?" He startled awake and smiled. "Must have gotten up too early today." I didn't press him, but I started feeling uneasy. A few days later, I saw him fall asleep in the massage chair, barely 2 minutes after finishing his morning coffee. I began jotting down the times he napped during the day, not thinking much of it at first, but the more I observed, the more concerned I became. There were days he slept nearly 4 hours during the day, yet still struggled to sleep at night, tossing and turning. I asked the doctor, and they recommended a sleep study and overnight oxygen monitoring. The results surprised me. He had moderate sleep apnea, with his oxygen levels dropping repeatedly during the night, and he had no idea. This condition leaves the body exhausted during the day. The brain, deprived of oxygen, defaults to its only coping mechanism, sleeping. But these naps don't help. They just make him more sluggish and mentally foggy. Sleep apnea, such an unfamiliar term, yet so common in older adults. And the danger is very real. It's closely linked to high blood pressure, heart problems, and especially the risk of nighttime strokes. As we drove home, he dozed off beside me, as usual, and I felt my eyes sting with tears. Not because of the diagnosis, but because I'd grown so used to the image of the alert, capable man beside me. Seeing him nod off mid-morning made me realize this wasn't ordinary tiredness. It was his body crying out for help, in silence. After that day, we made changes. We adjusted his sleeping posture, introduced a gentle breathing aid at night, made smarter food choices, and most importantly, we stopped treating daytime sleepiness as just part of getting old. I started paying closer attention, gently encouraging him to get some early morning sun, stay active, and we stayed in regular contact with his doctor. Not to control him, but to walk together into a safer, more alert old age. I share this story not to make anyone anxious about the occasional yawn, but to say, if you see a loved one falling asleep throughout the day, no matter the time, don't dismiss it. It's not just about being tired. Sometimes it's a sign that their body isn't getting enough oxygen or enough true rest. And if you love them, don't let them sleep through the loneliness of being unheard. Sign 6. Small wounds that are difficult to heal or keep recurrent in the same place. I don't remember exactly when the first scratch appeared. I just recall him saying, probably bumped into the chicken coop door. A small scrape on his shin, slightly red, something I assumed would heal in a few days. I cleaned it, applied antiseptic, and reminded him not to walk barefoot anymore. But a whole week passed, and it was still red. The scab formed, dried, then cracked open and oozed again. That's when I started feeling uneasy. He still smiled and said, "I'm old, skin's thinner now. Takes longer to heal." It sounded reasonable, but just a few days later, I noticed another one, this time on the back of his hand. Another minor scrape, but it followed the same troubling pattern: red, dry, bleeding, then red again, as if his skin no longer knew how to heal itself. I took him to see a dermatologist. They did an exam and recommended a blood sugar test. The results left me speechless, He was pre-diabetic with signs of impaired peripheral circulation. The doctor explained that slow-healing wounds in older adults are an important warning sign, an indication that blood vessels aren't delivering nutrients quickly enough to support healing. Without proper management, this could lead to skin ulcers, infections, even tissue death. I sat silently in the waiting room, listening to the loudspeaker call out unfamiliar names. And I felt fear. Fear that I had dismissed his wounds as minor. Fear that I'd applied ointment like a routine, never asking a deeper question. And above all, fear that if I hadn't paid attention by chance, I might have missed many other small wounds, not just on his skin, but within his health and his spirit. Now every time I see even a tiny cut on him, whether from a thorn or a scratch, I tend to it as if I'm caring for a delicate new bud. Not because I'm overreacting, but because I've come to understand that aging does not forgive neglect. A small wound today, if not cared for properly, can be the start of something we never want to face. If you've ever seen a slow healing wound on someone you love, please don't just apply ointment and wait. Ask another question, take a closer look, and if possible, take them to see a doctor. The body always finds ways to send out warnings. We just have to pause long enough to truly listen. Sign 7. Short breath. Heavily breathing even without doing any stress. I began to notice it in the afternoons. Every time he walked from the garden to the house, a distance of just a few dozen steps, he had to sit down to catch his breath. Not gasping, not dramatic, but short, shallow breaths, as if the air just wasn't enough. At first, I thought it was the heat, but even on cool, breezy days, he was the same. One time, he simply stood up to get his cup of tea, and within 10 seconds, he was back in his chair, hand on his chest, eyes closed for a moment. I asked, "Are you okay?" He said, "It's just age." Those 3 words, just age, sounded like a gentle excuse for everything slowly slipping out of control. But I knew it wasn't just that. This wasn't fatigue from gardening or muscle soreness after exercise. This was breathlessness without cause, something I had never seen in him before. I started to notice he was sleeping upright more often, maybe because lying down made it harder to breathe. During those times, I would sit beside him, say nothing, just rest my hand on his shoulder. We've spent more than half a lifetime together. I didn't need to hear complaints. I could see it in the way he breathed. His body was tired. I took him to a cardiologist. After several tests, the doctor said he was showing signs of mild heart failure. The heart wasn't pumping blood as efficiently as before, which was causing fluid to build up slightly in the lungs, leading to shortness of breath even during rest. The doctor added that many older adults overlook this symptom because it creeps in quietly, without drama, yet it's one of the most important red flags. I'm not sure how to describe what I felt at that moment. Not shock, because I had already sensed it, but a heaviness, not in my throat, but in my chest, where I've carried a man who's never once complained of being tired, now breathing carefully, as if not to disturb the air around him. Now, I don't ask, "Are you okay?" anymore. I ask, "What would you like me to cook today?" and choose lighter meals. I open the windows earlier, keeping the house airy. I go with him to regular checkups, make sure the medication is taken on time, and I've learned how to help him breathe, not just with his lungs, but with peace of mind. I share this as a gentle reminder. If someone you love begins to breathe harder during light activity or feels unusually tired while walking, don't dismiss it as just age. Let them get checked properly, because every full breath is a gift, and no one should lose it just because we've become too used to the silence. If today's story made you think of someone who might quietly be living with these signs, please consider sending them this video. Sometimes, a single act of sharing can change the course of someone's health journey. And if what I shared today resonated with you, don't hesitate to click like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so I can continue offering more heartfelt and meaningful reflections, especially for our generation. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I hope you always find a way to listen to the quiet voice inside yourself and inside the people you love.